Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Saturday, October 4th, 2025, and today we are going to be talking about the state of the race in the 2025 election set to take place in just 30 days. Today officially marks 30 days out from the November elections for Virginia, New Jersey, and the California Proposition 50 that a lot of people are paying close attention to, as it could determine the balance of power in the United States House of Representatives come the 2026 midterm elections. Now, on your screen right now is a very empty map, and that is for good reason. There are only two races here that have come to be, or two states rather, that have come to be, primary points of interest for the past few months as we've gotten into the final stages of this election season, and that is New Jersey's governor race, as well as the Virginia races, ranging from attorney general, lieutenant governor, and of course the gubernatorial race between Winsome Sears and Abigail Spanberger. Unfortunately, unlike 2021, when there was actually a map here that could detail the recall election, California is not on the map here, but we will talk about Proposition 50, what my prediction is roughly a month out in advance, and what we might expect in some of these races, as a lot of the things that we have been talking about might feel different over the coming weeks as we enter into the final stage with some changes in the state of Virginia. Now, we'll start off by focusing on the races that I honestly have come to believe to be the easiest to make a decision on. These are races where the Democrats or Republicans, in this case the Democrats, have come into this with a pretty large advantage, and in these two states, New Jersey and Virginia, both states that Kamala Harris won in the last election by 6 points, we can reasonably conclude that Democrats are probably going to win at least most of the races that are in contention right now. And that brings me to my first point. The Virginia governor's race, we talked about it with State Navigate just 2 days ago, but Democrats are, quote, virtually certain to win the governor's race in Virginia, and I honestly could not agree more. Abigail Spanberger has run a very strong campaign in the Commonwealth. It has been very difficult to see how Winsome Sears gets to the point that Glenn Youngkin did 4 years ago, and Donald Trump's approval rating and the government shutdown and a multitude of events and factors that might seem like they don't impact individual races to this degree have had a tremendous impact on the way that voters view the Republican Party, view Winsome Sears, and by nature, view the Republicans down the ballot as well as the Democrats that are running on this ticket. And so since the map here is outlined as we would, focus on for governor, my expectation in the governor's race roughly 1 month out is that Abigail Spanberger is probably going to win this race by 11 to 12 points. Now, it could be a little bit closer, and we might see some drag-down effect given the recent scandal coming out of the Attorney General's race in Virginia, but we'll see exactly how impactful that is in due time with more polling data, more of a conversation, and just longer than 24 hours to really analyze some of these more seemingly bigger deals. But, looking at the election, there could also be not as much of an impact as we might think. Again, getting back to this point of the governor's level, though, that would put this solidly in the likely column on the verge of being a safe state for the Democrats. But my expectation is that Abigail Spanberger wins this race from anywhere between 11 to 12 points, maybe on the upper end, maybe a little bit more narrow. I do expect her to outperform Hillary Clinton's margin in 2016, outperform Biden's margin in 2020, outperform Harris's margin in 2024, and outperform the margin for Ralph Northam in 2017 when he won his race by roughly 9 points. Virginia starts off strong for the Democrats on the governor level, going to the Democrats, I believe, by roughly 11 to 12 points. Now, New Jersey, I think this is the one that is certainly a bit more interesting. We'll get back to talk about New Jersey as we go through the remaining races here in Virginia, but the next one that I think is going to be interesting, it's not going to be mapped here, is the lieutenant governor's race, where my expectation here is that Ghazala Hashmi ends up winning this race probably by about, maybe not 8 points, probably wins by about 9 to 10 points. I think there will be some drop-off, as there was in 2021 and in 2017 in the down-ballot races, save, strong Democrats running on the race or strong Republicans. But when it comes down to the lieutenant governor's race, for instance, I think John Reed, although he's had his fair share of scandals, these things typically are not as well publicized, nor are they voted on as much. Mark Robinson, he was super scandal-plagued in 2024, but would you believe me if I told you that a lot of the comments that he made about women, Jewish people, the LGBT community, were all things that had come out in the 2020 election, but nobody cared. And it wasn't as if, voters were saying, I'm willing to look past it. They simply did not pay close enough attention because everybody, left, right, and center, was focused then, at least in 2020, on the presidential, on the Senate, on the gubernatorial, and it took a lot for it to trickle down. It's a little bit different because 2025 is an off year, there is no Kamala Harris v. Donald Trump to run it at the top of the ticket, which is why I do think that there's even this slim possibility that John Reed has the 8% chance of winning that State Navigate affords him. But what I do believe is that ultimately this state, if it's going for Abigail Spanberger by 12, it's going to go to the Democrats in the lieutenant governor's race probably by 9 or 10. And I think you're going to get to that point where, the drop-off might exist, but to the degree that it is expected to exist, I'd argue that it's going to be a lot closer to what the actual governor margin is than what we might think. The one tricky race about Virginia isn't the lieutenant governor's race, and it's not the governor's race. It is the attorney general's race, where some very bad text messages were leaked about Jay Jones in comment to family members and members on the Republican side of the Virginia State Assembly, or their House of Delegates. So some ones that Democrats and Republicans universally have disavowed and said are inappropriate, were very wrong to do, and arguably I don't think anybody can disagree with that. These are not things that are becoming, in terms of, the way people talk about others, not becoming of American politics at all. And so thinking about this race, the attorney general's race, I do not think the forecast has had time to update, because you can't really gauge these things until you start seeing data points that suggest there is an impact. But I do think there is an impact. I think Jay Jones, as the Democratic nominee, is carried across the finish line. I do think this scandal is tremendous in a bad way. And I do think it's one that, in any swing race, would tip the scales away from the winning party. But this is not a swing race. Before this scandal dropped, he was expected to win by 8. My estimation is he probably wins by 2 or 3. I do think that, especially in a state like Virginia, where you oftentimes have a more tuned and tapped in electorate than in other states, and also to a race where Jason Miyares, as the incumbent attorney general, actually has more money than Winsome Sears in this race. He has the means to run an ad blitz on this recent scandal, and I do think there will be an impact. In any other race, I think Jay Jones would have lost it. In a state that is as lopsided in favor of the Democrats as Virginia, it will be hard to see how you come far off from this lead. But it's certainly possible. And that is the race that I'm keeping in the low single digits in terms of expectation, because there is a very real possibility, probably, it says 8% here, I'd say maybe a 30% chance, 33% chance even, that Jason Miyares wins. Because this race, I think, is the true and total toss-up out of all of them, really. Maybe New Jersey could be closer, we'll see. But Attorney General right now, I think that Jay Jones still pulls ahead, but to the degree that he was before, absolutely not. And it's going to be a race to watch. So Virginia, I've pretty much given you my thoughts. I don't really have many when it comes down to the House of Delegates races. I don't follow them closely enough. But what I do know is that when it comes down to the level of governor, lieutenant governor, and including attorney general, including the most recent scandal that has plagued Jay Jones, Democrats are probably still going to pull ahead. Moving over to the next state, Virginia, and I will say this, I didn't spend much time looking at it. But even the betting market odds, the only one where they are more confident of the Republicans than the Democrats is the Attorney General's race. And last night when the scandal broke, it was at 75% chance that Republicans would win the Attorney General's race. Today it's down to 55%. I imagine in a few weeks, especially if the data doesn't show as significant of a swing, that it will return back to being in favor of the Democrats. But it'll be interesting to see so far. Jay Jones right now, is not the favorite on the betting market odds. But I do believe, at least as it stands currently, probably is the best way to put it, going to win the Attorney General's race. New Jersey is a bit trickier. This is a state that since the last election saw a 10-point shift to the right between 2020 and 2024. And that makes it a bit difficult to forecast. Because also 4 years ago, there was a governor's race in New Jersey where Jack Ciattarelli, the same Republican nominee, this is his third time running, by the way, he ran in 2017, lost the primary, ran in 2021, won the primary, lost the general. Now he's won the primary again. The question is, can he win the general? My honest take, probably not. I think that Mikey Sherrill, this campaign, has not been great for the Democrats. I think that when she was initially fielded, it seemed like Democrats had landed a very strong recruit. And honestly, through the primary process, it seemed like she would be the best bet for Democrats in this race. And she still might have been. I mean, we don't know how the other Democrats would have performed. But as it stands right now, I do think that this race is close for a reason. One, Ciattarelli has, in a way, not embraced Trump, but adopted a new style of conservative attitude that I think a lot of voters in the state who warmed up to Trump in 2024 are really resonating with, including a lot of these swing voters, the Clinton, Biden, Trump voters There's hundreds of thousands of them in New Jersey, by the way, which is important to note. You have a lot of voters who doubled in against Trump and then switched over this time around that are in for Chattarelli. And not to mention that Mikey Sherrill, I do think, has a very national focused campaign. I think she will still win the race, don't get me wrong. But to the degree that she wins by, I don't know. I think we could see it. Let's say the final month of this campaign is really strong for Mikey Sherrill. She wins by 8, but that's the max. But right now, I think she'd win by 4. Now, things can change, and I could be wrong, right? But I do believe that where we stand right now in terms of data points is that New Jersey is significantly closer than Virginia, and that the expectations in New Jersey are that it is significantly closer than Virginia. And I do believe that when it comes down brass tacks to candidate quality, a variety of the issues that are surrounding New Jersey versus Virginia, very different states, they don't benefit the Democrats as much in New Jersey as they do in Virginia. And I do believe that Chattarelli, who has, again, ushered in this new style of attitude towards the campaign that I think has actually done him quite a number of solids, when it comes down to New Jersey, I think Mikey Sherrill wins, but she does not win by a lot. Democrats, however, still hold on to the governorship in New Jersey. They flip it in Virginia, and so it would be interesting to see. The final state to focus on is California Proposition 50, which is the vote that authorizes temporary changes to the congressional district maps in this state. Essentially, Gavin Newsom's pushback against Texas for redrawing their state boundaries. California Proposition 50, also known as the Election Rigging Response Act. You can start to see exactly what having Democrats on your side in the writing of the language and in the Secretary of State's office can do for you. But in Proposition 50, point blank, voters support it pretty heavily. I think this passes, probably not, by 20, 25 points, the way that Democrats traditionally would win in a state like California, even though it swung, significantly to the right. In 2020, Biden won the state by a pretty significant amount, I think 29 points. In 2024, Kamala Harris won it by 20. Even then, I still believe, even though it's a double-digit victory for Kamala Harris, I think Proposition 50 probably is going to be closer than we think. I think we're probably going to see it pass by about 5 to 10 points. And I think that might be really surprising for Democrats. I do think that, at the end of the day, the polling data is strong. And it suggests that maybe I'll be completely wrong and it'll be blown out of the water, because I actually expected Newsom's recall election to go a lot more poorly for him. I thought he would still survive it for sure. But to the degree that I thought he would outperform his 2018 metrics, no. That he would only, underperform himself a year later when he was actually on the ballot. Very different things, but still, right? Because it was an off year, because Democrats did not have an appetite to recall Gavin Newsom then, and they saw it as what it was, which was Republicans trying to abuse the recall system to remove him from office, obviously was rejected. But for California Proposition 50, I don't know if every single Democrat is on board in this race. I think what we've seen is a very national push, and one in the state too from some of the state's top legislators, top representatives, major players, Alex Padilla, Adam Schiff, all in and on board. But they kind of have to be, right? Because the National Democratic Party is on board. But the question is, for a lot of those voters in California that are in the left, but do oppose on a moral basis things like congressional gerrymandering, regardless of who's doing it, there's a sizable portion of them in an overwhelming Democratic state. Now, I do think Proposition 50 passes. Would it pass in a state like Michigan? Probably not. Would it pass in a state like Pennsylvania? Probably not. It takes a Democratic state to put forth the clear and blatant language that is here for people to greenlight it and rubber stamp it and move it on to the redrawing of the map. In California, I think it'll happen. But my bet, 5 to 10 points in terms of margin, at least as it stands right now. Now, the last race I completely forgot to mention that I absolutely should be talking about that just popped into my mind. I'm glad that I did, because I would have really been upset had I not talked about it. The main one that I think is the most important to talk about is the New York City mayoral race between Mamdani, Andrew Cuomo, and Curtis Lewa, now that Eric Adams is out of the race. I think the reason that I oversaw it, because largely speaking, if I'm being honest with you, I never really saw it much as an election that was going to be that competitive, just simply on the basis that I do think Mamdani's going to win that race, and I think he's probably going to win it by 15. I think that has really been the most interesting part of it, was that in the 2025 race, you have, New York City, which is, again, the largest city in the country, right? You're talking about a huge sizable portion. I think 38 states are smaller. 38 states, you heard that right. 38 states are smaller than New York City. And I think that thinking about the 2025 cycle, if we get here, maybe we'll jump over to it. Mamdani is the Democrat in a city, where, might as well be a state, but in the city where Democrats outnumber Republicans 6-1. Cuomo might be a former Democrat, but he also was somebody who had to resign his office because of his involvement and allegations put forth against him involving sexual harassment and sexual assault. And so thinking about what we can expect in the general election, Mamdani, who has already supercharged the Democratic base, which exists as the voting electorate, might I add, in New York City, with Curtis Sliwa being hell-bent that he is staying in the race no matter what anybody says. And Andrew Cuomo, who comes into this as this fake independent, who was everybody's COVID governor from 2020, who left office early and is now trying to make a return in New York City, even though Eric Adams is out of the race. My honest take here, and my prediction, and I think that's, again, why it was glossed over, because I felt like this has been a certainty for quite some time, that Mamdani in New York City is going to win by double digits and probably win in this multi-way race by 15 to 20 points. Maybe things could narrow. If Curtis Sliwa drops out, Donald Trump endorses Andrew Cuomo, a lot of ifs, ands, and buts, and I don't think we're even going to get to that point. But even if it does, maybe, and that's a maybe, that this race turns the tide against Mamdani. But as it stands currently, I don't see a viable pathway forward for anybody but Zoran. And thinking about this race in New York City, it is the Democrats who I believe firmly that will come out ahead in New York City and win this race, and that Mamdani will be the next mayor of New York City. So that's where I'm at. A month out from the 2025 elections, November 4th is truly right around the corner. It'll be a fascinating race to watch, a very important one at that, and a lot of decisions to be made by a lot of voters across this great nation. A lot to unpack. We'll keep a close eye. The next 4 weeks will be fun and interesting, and will tell us a lot about the 2026 midterms. But that's where I stand with 30 days to go, but maybe a lot of time to change. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video for you to watch, and then a playlist for my 2025 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.